morning and welcome to Passport to the World with Cathy Retief-Neil. Yippee! Guess who's in the studio with me today? I'm not allowed to say this, but I can't help my all-time favorite, Dawn Jorgensen. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Cathy. I know how many wonderful guests you have, so that's a huge compliment.
It's so difficult, you know. I have fabulous guests in the studio and I love them all, but I'm so happy to see you back again. I've been following you on Facebook and on your blog, The Incidental Tourist, and I can't believe you've actually on terra firma and you're sitting in the studio because you have been buzzing.
I have. I've had a very busy year, but especially the last few months. But for now, I'm actually at home for 2 or 3 months, just doing 1 or 2 little things and catching up on writing and sharing my experiences and just being at home. I love Cape Town in winter, so it's a pleasure to be here and to see you.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy that you are in the studio this morning, Dawn. I thought I was catching you before you hop off on your next adventure, so I'm happy to hear you're going to have a little bit of a break,
Definitely.
if we can call it that. You're going to be working and writing, and of course I follow your blog and your Facebook and everything else, and your magazines and everywhere else that you write for, and you have really been a busy lady. And the one thing I do know, I mean, everyone refers to you as this, you know, conscious traveler and Earth Mother, and certainly not an exaggeration, because I know in your heart you are someone who truly cares about, you know, Mother Earth and its creatures and everything that happens and how we're destroying everything and all the rest of it. So this tour that you went on with Trafalgar was really something special.
It was. As you say, I think I've sort of evolved over the last years to be what I call a conscious traveler, and sustainable tourism, ecotourism, always having consideration for the place that I'm in, the people that are welcoming me and hosting me, and just the environment. It's really become an essential part of what I do and an essential theme in my travels. It needs to have a deeper meaning, and I need to learn, and I need to be able to send out a positive message about how we can as individuals make a difference and travel consciously. So when I got an invitation from Trafalgar to a media tour to Italy and Austria, I mean, that was enough. But then when I saw that it was actually hosted by TreadRight Foundation, their arm, the side of Trafalgar that actually does good and works with communities, and that the whole theme was about sustainable travel, and that we would really be unlocking the places that we visited, with personal experiences, with the communities, and learning about the environments, and it was just perfect. It was just such a match, and I was so pleased to be invited on it.
But isn't it wonderful that Trafalgar being part of the Travel Corporation, and we all know that there are many, many companies involved under the umbrella of the Travel Corporation, that they have taken, they've taken themselves to task, and they're making it part of their company in every respect, to be more conscious when traveling.
They definitely have, and I think that you look to them and the influence that they have and the amount of people that they are hosting in a year, and if you think that they can have an influence on them, and just the places that they visit, and they have this wonderful little tagline that I just am hooked on. It's travel today, sustain tomorrow, and I think we should all be bearing that in mind as we go. When you explore the destinations, if they can just tell the guests on their trip a little bit more about the communities, a bit more about the artisan and the passion that they hold, and so you're not just going there to take a destination off your list, but you actually are contributing to supporting perhaps someone who's been working in a craft for 5th generation, or a beautiful historic building that by visiting can sustain itself, or can do renovations, or whatever it can be, whatever level it's on, and they really are leading the way with that. I mean, we were so lucky because not only was I on this media trip to beautiful places, but the TreadRight Foundation's ambassador is Celine Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau's
granddaughter.
The name is so familiar.
I know, and I'm such an ocean lover and self-proclaimed ocean advocate. So to be able to meet her and travel with her for a few days and have conversations about the essential work that she's doing for TreadRight, for the oceans, how she had been to South Africa and just fallen in love with it. I mean, it made me feel so proud when we had our presentation on the one night, and one of the videos that she she showed as she talked about the work that she did was one that was taken at Bushman's Kloof. And everyone in the group, they were from Malaysia and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, and everyone being so wowed by the beauty of our country, and just being reminded by her and her involvement with TreadRight and Trafalgar of how important it is to be traveling responsibly.
And of course, the responsible travel is not only about meeting and greeting humans and artisans and spreading the love everywhere, but also extends to animals, which I think is fabulous, because no one really perhaps didn't think further than what lies behind riding an elephant, elephant and petting dolphins and all this kind of thing. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It was just something that we all aspired to do. I want to ride an elephant. I want to swim with the dolphins, etc. So they have also created an awareness around that. So that's fabulous. It's not just, it's sustainable travel and tourism throughout.
Completely. And I think it's difficult to take a stance or to have principles relating to things like animal rights, perhaps just the impact that you might have on a community. And in regard to animal rights, I mean, to say as a blanket decision that they will not support anyone who is allowing animals to be petted, baby lions to be petted, tigers, perhaps even in Asia, riding of elephants, because they have done that in-depth investigating into where those animals come from and what it takes to train or break the spirit of an elephant in order for it to be ridden. What happens to those baby lions that are perceived to be orphaned by people who are buying the tickets and yet have been taken from their mothers and are going to possibly end up either in zoos or in
canned lions.
Worst, canned lion hunting, which is true of our country. So Trafalgar and as you say, the Travel Corporation, who have a lot of brands under their name, for them as an organization to say that they will only act responsibly,
that's
and that
huge.
It is huge, and then it's not only them making that decision, but if you think how many people they have on their tours every year who may be saying, why am I not riding an elephant, and why have you not included petting a lion cub, to give them the message, because it all comes down to education. I think most people, if they knew what happened to that elephant before you rode it, or if they knew the pain that an ostrich is going to feel when you hop on its back, I'm sure they wouldn't want to do it. So that is another role that the TreadRight Foundation is playing, and that we as the media on the trip were immersed into, so we can also spread that message and try and grow this whole theme, which has to be the future, which is sustainable and responsible travel.
Well, we're busy destroying our planet, so we have to do something, and this is certainly a big step in that direction.
Yes.
Dawn, tell me a little bit more about your actual trip, because I know you went to some of my favorite places. You went to Rome and Venice and all over the show. Been there, want to go again.
And I think that's the most important point, is that, responsible travel does not mean compromise on your experience. You can travel responsibly and still have the very best of this world, but with a feel-good element. So be very, put some thought and do a little bit of research when you're planning who you want to travel with. I mean, on this trip, we started in Rome, and I love Italy. I mean, I really, this was my third visit, and I don't know, there's just something about it. It's just got such a passion on the streets, and it's just such a beautiful place. So we started in Italy, and we had a tour or a travel director that met us at the hotel, and he was with us for the whole duration. I mean, I think things that you only see in Italy, the coach driver was in a beautifully tailored suit, the travel director in a beautifully tailored suit, and they were just with us from the beginning. And then what the tour entailed is that we went from Rome to Perugia, across to Siena, San Gimignano, and then Venice, which was a highlight, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, and then across into Austria. We went to Villach and Salzburg, and in each place we had a local expert. So we would have the connection of our our travel director taking us from one place to the next, linking it up with stories and the history and the geography of the places we drove through. And then at each place we would walk that destination. We would have a local expert who would spend just 2 or 3 hours with us, taking us through the city, pointing out, the highlights, and then we'd have time on our own. And that's another thing that I love about Trafalgar, because people can be put off by the concept or the idea of group travel, but you get all the advantages of being looked after in a group, but then you have your guide who is telling you so much more, and then you have your local expert, and then you visit places and people that you probably wouldn't have access to unless you were with Trafalgar, and then you have time on your own, which you can either eat in, drink Prosecco, indulge in gelato, or just walk the streets, do a bit of shopping, whatever you want to do. Just sit on a square and watch the world go by. And that balance, which I think Trafalgar gets right, is why I would always recommend a trip with them.
Absolutely. And what I do like about them, Dawn, is that all their companies, it's the groups are intimate. And
Yes.
you are traveling with like-minded people.
Yes.
Even with the media group, they are like-minded people. Whether it's just a group of people from across the world, they are like-minded people. So I think it's very nice. You make friends, you get to know people, and the groups are intimate enough so that you don't feel you don't get to know the people in your group. I think that's fabulous. And the me time, the downtime, to me is terribly important as well.
It is. I think you're an independent traveller. I'm an independent traveller, and I would happily go to nearly any destination, which I'm sure worries my mother somewhat. But I would, and I would find my way. But I love a guide. I love someone telling me the anecdotal stories from the places that I'm in, and yet still not being so locked up into an itinerary that has me, all the time with someone. And what was interesting that, we want that downtime, we want that alone time, but because we are like-minded people, on a trip like this, when we did have the opportunity to we broke into little clusters of people who, we didn't go off on our own. It was like, okay, who wants gelato? Who wants to go and take photos here? Who wants to go to the bookstore? And we then kept bumping into each other because, you are making friends. And it's always that first day or that first few hours on the coach or on the tour, you kind of looking at each other and checking each other out. And then, by the next day, you're, sort of besties and swapping places and trying to have conversations and get to know each other. And it's always adds an extra dimension when you can have the experience through your own eyes and your own, personal interest, and then also the fact that you're speaking to people from completely different walks of life or different countries.
That's a learning curve in itself.
Yes, and then you hear what their interpretation of the experience is, or what they're loving most of it, or what their concerns are when it comes to the theme of sustainable travels, and how their countries are dealing with it, and the policies that they're applying. And so just overall, it's such a learning curve, and in the most beautiful of places with such lovely people. So it was a win-win all round.
Absolutely. And the Travel Corporation, we know, is a family business. It's grown from strength to strength. That goes without saying. One of the biggest in the world now. And the Tolman family, I've had the pleasure of meeting Gavin Tolman, and I have to say what I do like about them is their involvement in their companies. They're always visible. I believe Gavin even joined your tour for a couple of days. And, this is not the kind of thing that you find most company owners and directors and what have you. They don't be bothered. They're sitting behind their desk counting the money. Whereas the Tolman family seem to be so involved. I know from the Uniworld cruise, even on the menu you had, Mrs. Tolman's recipes and things like that. And she did the decor. So it's wonderful to see that there is that. And I think that's where the intimacy comes from on their tours, is the fact that they participate.
They
everything.
do. And we had Gavin with us for the first 2 nights, so sort of 3 days. And one of the first things that we did in Rome after a tour and settling in is we went to Tiber Island, which, Tiber is the river that goes through the middle of Rome. And there's this little island with just a select few buildings on it. It's quite a good address, if we can put it that way.
Yes.
And we joined Chef Fabio, who is this obviously, speaks with these hands, completely charismatic chef who has a history and has all of these restaurants. But Gavin, being there with us, had gone and met him before. They don't just put these every experience that we have, every Be My Guest experience where we go into people's homes and have lunch, they've been investigated. If they're being supported by TreadRight, the Tolmans are so involved with their brand and with their product that they are personally getting to know people. We went and met a woman called Marta in Perugia, and she weaves the most beautiful tablecloths. I mean, she's gone back to how it was done. It takes her 20 days to make a tablecloth.
Wow.
And she's just remarkable and passionate. But, when we walked in there, her and Gavin greeted like friends. He'd met her before. He knew all about her little dog that was such a part of the experience.
Oh,
and
it's amazing. That's what I mean, that warmth spreads from the top all the way down.
It is a family. It might be a big business, but it is a family business. And you see this at all of their properties. Yeah. And, that is quite an accomplishment in this day and age to still have that commitment to what they're doing and that sense of pride.
Absolutely.
I think if anything went wrong, they would take it incredibly personally. So they ensure that they're there or have the right people on the ground to make sure that nothing does go wrong.
Absolutely. It's a very special involvement. So tell us a little bit more about, where do you want to take us to? A bit of Rome, or are we carrying on? Because I know we want to get to Venice as well.
Well, Rome, I love Rome, but we literally just had an afternoon and a beautiful meal with Chef Fabio in his apartment that had once been lived in by Marlon Brando. And he showed us, and an Italian movie director, and he showed us a bit of a clip from a 1970s passionate Italian, movie, which is exactly what you expect from the country. And then from there we went on to Perugia, where it was raining. It was gorgeous. All of these areas. This is in Umbria, which I absolutely love Umbria. I think everyone talks about Tuscany, and Tuscany is beautiful, but Umbria is a little bit, it's still a little bit untouched, and it's less busy. And Perugia is yet another beautiful city with a big cathedral in the middle, views across the valley. And that is where we met Marta with her weaving program. And then we went from there on to Siena. Siena is a medieval town. I don't know if you've been there.
Yes, I have indeed.
We did a walk around there. There's 14th century tower that you can go with, just incredible views as well. And there, after having our tour, a few of us, I was with Lisa, a few of us went off, including Lisa and myself, and we ate gelato. We just walked around the pastries, the coffee, obviously the wine, because,
I was so jealous when I read that, because, Lisa is such fun. And just imagine what
so much
fun I would have had if I'd been with you guys.
And I was very lucky because there were a couple of girls from Australia and a Canadian girl who I've traveled with before. So I think that, like with these Trafalgar trips, you say that you make friends along the way, and you sometimes see them again when you're back on your trip. Siena is, I think, if you are going into that area, that Siena is definitely a place that you must put on your list as a destination. We visited a family-run farm where the daughter is the winemaker. The father is actually a professor of neurology in Rome, and he met an American woman who had come out to study literature. And they fell in love, of course.
Stories like that just make the trip.
And they invited us into their home. They had this big sloppy dog that was about waist high, and we ate their olives and we drank their wine, and we had a beautiful lunch that the daughter had prepared in the cellar. that is the kind of thing that just makes for travel. That's what travel should be about.
That's the kind of experience, Dawn, that you can never have on your own.
No, you can't have it on your own.
This is the difference between having all these wonderful experiences planned for you, as opposed to you falling into a country and doing your own thing. You cannot compare the experiences one to the other.
I don't even know how they find them. They parked the coach and we walked up this pathway, this little dirt road, and then there was this driveway just lined with trees, and you get up and there's this beautiful Tuscan villa with gardens everywhere that are beautifully maintained, and it just feels like home. I mean, we might have eaten in the cellar, but we were invited into their home first to have drinks and conversation, and it was just so lovely to learn about how this love affair for this woman from Seattle had formed, and how she fell in love with her professor, but she fell in love with Italy. And I think once that's happened, it's quite a hard place to move on from. After that, San Gimignano, which I had visited before, and quite honestly, I'll never get over it. It used to have 72 towers. It now has 13 that stand tall today. Some are homes. There's a museum in the one. You can actually climb to the top of another. And here, we did our walk. The stores here, whether they're selling charcuterie or artwork or beautiful ceramics, you can actually spend a lot of money here without trying too hard. Another claim to fame is that they have a gelato or gelateria that has won best gelateria in the world 3 years running. And we met Sergio. Of course, he's a friend of Trafalgar, so he came out and spoke to us on the square. And, when we asked him about his passion, and it's like a life calling. Who would imagine that making ice cream could be a life calling? But for him it is. And afterwards I went in to get gelato, and how do you choose? There's just so much. But he actually made one specifically for Michelle Obama when she was visiting. And he's got this whole sort of theme of things that are happening that he brings into his flavors, and he's always creating something new. And just walking around, there'll be artists. There was an artist that was just sitting making these beautiful, tiny, intricate little, watercolor paintings of this beautiful San Gimignano. So, it's very idyllic. And as though that isn't good enough, we then went to Venice.
What is better than Venice? This whole trip sounds, give or take, very much like a trip that Bloming and I did 2 years ago. We did the same sort of thing from Rome to Venice through to Austria, the whole thing. And it was, obviously we didn't have the time or the guided tour, but very similar route to what we followed. And of course, Venice, I love Venice. And
the distances aren't that great. I think that, that is an important thing to mention, that even though each destination, I think on the standard Trafalgar tours, you spend 2 nights at each destination, but you're not in the coach all day. It'll be 2 hours or 3 hours, and there's Wi-Fi on the coach, so it's actually quite nice to have a bit of downtime.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's Tony was talking to us and telling us things, and we were catching up on a little bit of work, or having a little bit of a brag on social media about how beautiful our experience was, and the distances are not great. And I mean, when we arrived in Venice and checked into a hotel, and I was very lucky. I had a room, and I looked over on the Grand Canal, and it was a very surreal moment for me, because I know that people say Venice is the most beautiful city in the world, but it has to be seen. It can't really be described adequately. It's just so unique, and
I want to go back to Venice for at least 7 to 10 days.
Oh, that would be amazing.
You need to go there for a length of time. You need to explore all those little alleyways. And you need to go over to Burano and some of the other islands.
Right.
There's so much that you can do there, but you need time to do it.
You do, and we were lucky to have 2 nights there and quite a bit of time. But I didn't know that there were 118 islands in Venice, over 400 bridges. Lots of secret gardens, because these, who would have thought they were
don't know,
gardens? Because this
exactly.
is, just waterways, and the buildings are just so intricate, and over 500 gondolas, although it's very expensive.
It's about 1,500 rand or more, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about €100 to have 20 minutes on a gondola.
I know, it's 1,500 rand, a lot of money.
Yeah, I think if you're
ride.
splashing out, it's probably worth it. Otherwise, just take photos of them. And we took a water taxi, which you can get some friends involved in, and it's much better to do that.
Well, the vaporettos are quite affordable, but I have to tell you, I will not go to Venice again without a guide.
No, we had a local guide, as we did everywhere, who pointed out things like, Marco Polo's home. I didn't know that's where Marco Polo came from. And we visited a local market, and then you get a sense of, a few streets back, how people live here. And I think that is always an important aspect of trying to unlock life in these places, not just from a tourist perspective, not just the main attractions. Of course, you have to go to St. Mark's Piazza, and you've got to,
of course,
there were people there. Someone gave me a few little tiny peanuts to give to the pigeons, which I did take, and I did get such a thrill out of doing it. But then he wanted €10 for the pleasure, and I just said, no, I'm South African.
Wow.
I'm sorry, but I did give him something. But that's an experience to have in Venice, and it's all part of the fun. But then to go a few streets back and to see the market. I mean, I've never seen vegetables like that. And then, as you say, going to beautiful places like Burano, an island which has these candy-colored homes.
A bit like the Boerkaap.
Exactly, a bit like Boerkaap. And where, it has a very strong lace industry. And we had lunch in a beautiful restaurant there, and this teeny little woman walked past, and she was 103. And she had been one of the people who had worked in the lace industry her whole life, and was running the museum at 103, and just popped around from restaurant, wherever she pitched up, she was almost just fed and given coffee and looked after, as someone loved on the island.
It's so sad to think that in generations to come, Venice might not be there for them.
Well, don't say that. They've just actually outlawed cruise liners 2 or 3 days ago.
I believe so.
Which I think is another step towards sustainable travel. I mean,
absolutely.
I love a cruise, but I think that there are places that cruise liners who do a lot of damage should not be allowed to. So, allowed to go. And Venice highlight was a bookstore.
Oh.
I just love books, and the bookshop that we went into, you need a guide to find it, I think. Because Venice floods about 40 or 50 times a year. So
you go into your apartment and you find these waterproof boots that you can wear.
What is that
if you want to go to St. Mark's Square and you're going to be walking in the water.
And in this bookshop, nearly all the books are in gondolas. So if it floods, they just go up. So it's very charming. That's sort of how the Italians would deal with a problem like that.
Dawn, I wish we had another half hour, but we're running out of time. Are we even going to get to Austria?
Let's get to Austria really quickly. I think for me, a wonderful Be My Guest experience, again, something that I could never have offered myself, was visiting Kloster Wernberg, which is where nuns live just outside Villach, and they farm and they offer workshops in sustainable living, retreats. For me, I was in a convent. I'm a convent girl. I mean, it was so special to connect with that. And actually, they had roots with South Africa, with a lot of the sisters having worked in South Africa. And it was actually founded by an Austrian in South Africa. So, we always love those little connections.
Yes.
And then on to Salzburg, which was our last stop, staying in Schloss Leopoldskron.
Oh, nogal.
Well,
you're not shy,
no, not. It was quite something. And I mean, if you've watched The Sound of Music, which I have, and I love The Sound of Music, it was filmed here in Salzburg and at the Schloss, and there were all these areas that we visited, like the Mirabel Gardens, and you could, I Am 17, Going on 18, all those songs, you could actually see these images in your mind, and you were actually standing there. Also the birthplace of Mozart. There's just so much. And as we crossed from Italy,
it's a city of music, isn't it? Composers, the number of composers that lived or come from Salzburg is mind-boggling.
Yes, and I had no idea. And as we crossed from Italy into Austria, it was cool. It was still springtime, but immediately there was snow on the mountains. I'd never been to Austria, and it was just
it's a beautiful country.
Such a wonderful ambiance. It was almost like an instant, now we're in a different place. It's also more organized, because Italy is kind of chaotic, which I love, and then Austria is really organized.
Austria is sort of going into the Swiss way of life.
Definitely, and there's something to be said. Everyone was just doing the right thing. So, that was where it ended, and then we reluctantly were torn away and sent home. But as I always say about Trafalgar, you strangers leaving as friends, and having had experiences that I'm quite sure I wouldn't have been able to give myself, and all with the sustainable tourism theme. All the places we visited, even the Schloss, they are supported by Trafalgar. It's not an easy place to maintain. The sisters, the visitors to the sisters, that all makes a difference. Mm-hmm. Having lunch with them, talking with them, visiting their garden. These are very special experiences, and they teach you how tourism can be done right. And I've really come back. It feels like an anchor experience for me that just reminds me why I'm on this path to promote sustainable tourism.
Absolutely. And it's so wonderful to be able to speak to Dawn and to get some insight into the sustainable tourism. It's, you go on a tour, and do you really know what's going on behind the scenes? And you've spoken a lot about their involvement and how they know the people, and how you're helping by, visiting the nuns and eating with the nuns. You don't think about that when you go just as a tourist. If you have these things in your mind before you go on a trip, I think it's a jolly good thing to have these things on your mind before you go on a trip anyway. And then don't you think if you're doing good, you feel good?
You do. I mean, imagine that you can have these wonderful experiences and you're contributing to the communities, and it's feel good. It's complete feel good all round. And I think that we need to be conscious. We need to be choosing the right companies and the right places. Every hotel we stayed in was either a family hotel or had a lovely history. And that makes a difference. And there is no compromise. There is actually the opposite, because you are staying with like-minded people, you're meeting like-minded people, you're taking lessons that are not just about the history and geography, but about how people's lives are affected
yes.
and how they can be positively affected.
Well, there you
go.
And
yours is in turn.
It is indeed. And the nice thing is that you can spread the word.
Yes.
I think that's the most important part. Absolutely. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for coming in this morning. I always love having you in the studio. Your passion and your genuine warmth towards people and travel. And we're not even going to go into the everything that you're passionate about. You're just a passionate person, aren't you?
I am. And I'm just always humbled by all of these experiences that I have.
Such a privilege.
It is definitely a privilege.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed our chat to Dawn Jorgensen this morning, and that you will join us same time next week on Passport to the World. Until then, happy travels.
Thank you.
Passport to the World was proudly sponsored by Trafalgar. Simply the best way to holiday. It is time to explore the world with Trafalgar. Unwind into your holiday and enjoy effortless travel. Book on over 230 trips worldwide and save 3,000 Rand per person on your flight. This deal is valid until 30 June. Book early as seats are selling out fast. What are you waiting for? Visit Trafalgar.com or call 011 280 8440 to speak to a specialist consultant or talk to your travel agent. Trafalgar, simply the best way to holiday.